So this will be the third time I try recording this. The last two times I've listened to it afterwards and found myself saying things that I didn't want to say, so we'll hope that it goes better this time. As I said in the last video or two, I don't want to just push out content just for the sake of pushing it out. It's not like I have a whole lot invested in YouTube anyway, but I'm not interested in trying to get 1 million subscribers and make money off of this or anything like that. It's just sort of a in this situation I felt, I guess, something like obligated to explain what's going on from my perspective as a person in a position to know. And this is one of the situations where this is more important than they're making it out to be. And I know that you can trust the Democratic state media to downplay situations, but the reality is they don't understand this either. By definition, they have no idea what they're talking about. Neither do any of the conservative pundits, to be fair. So I just wanted to run through and explain real quick how things work, and then sort of give my take on why this is more important than you're probably assuming. So just as for some background context, I work in a SCIF. I have worked in a SCIF for a long time, over a decade now. Not just one, I work in various SCIFs, but the facility itself. I'll explain what SCIF stands for and what that means. But effectively, I deal with what the media and what movies and people who don't have any idea what they're talking about would call classified material, classified information, and even what the cringy movies would call highly classified information, which is a complete nonsense label that means absolutely nothing. So just starting with the basics, classification is sort of a ladder that turns into a tree. It's not necessarily a ladder all the way up. So you have your first few steps, and then once you get to a certain level, things just kind of branch out based on the type of information associated with the program, whether or not it's a weapon system or sort of an intel program. All those things are taken into account, and they're assigned designators based on that. So first you have the unclass level. So this is not an official designator. It's not like everything I send out on my government email needs to be marked unclassed. It's just assumed because we're on the NIPR server, which is basically just the unclassed general government email server that we use to communicate. You don't need to label that stuff. It's not an official classification. It's just a way of, if you're in a secret or higher environment, it's a way of making sure that people know that this information is not secret, so it is transmissible, etc. So then you get into the next step. You get into like sort of the fuzzy area where people use different designators. In my career field, I have never seen something marked confidential. That seems to be more of potentially an FBI thing, although I may be just talking out of my ass there. I've never seen it, and I've never worked with the FBI, and I wouldn't want to, especially in the state that they're in now. But the confidential designator is sort of the same in effect as the FOUO designator. So FOUO is for official use only. That term has since gone by the wayside, and we use the term CUI now, controlled unclassified information. So in controlled unclassified information, you have general stuff like, depending on who the people are and where they work, their names and addresses could be CUI. They could be higher, depending on the program that they're working on, but just generally speaking. Anytime I send an email to somebody on my team or a security manager with my social security number in it, the email has to be marked CUI. And this is just a way of saying, this is not information that's critical to national security in any way, but it's not information that we want you to disseminate, which makes sense. So controlled unclassified information is, at least in my career field, used mostly in an academic role or an administrative role. But I have seen some government program-specific information labeled CUI. It's just almost like a why bother. It's the difference between do I have to shut my laptop screen when my wife walks behind me or don't I, if that makes sense. And then moving up from there, you go to secret. So secret is the baseline level when you're talking about what the media, again, would call classified information. I would guess that probably 80% of all classified information, meaning information or material that has a classification attached to it, is at the secret level, maybe even higher than 80%, maybe something like 90%. This is a lot of weapon system specs, type of hardware that's being used, the function of certain components of your weapon system, etc. So this is something we don't want our enemies knowing about, and secret information must be kept within a restricted area. You can't talk about secret information if you're in an outside restricted area. So, for instance, sometimes I work in a restricted area that's a bunch of buildings in one big fenced-off area has a protected single point of entry. And the reason for the single point of entry is not because it's secret. There's an additional security reason why there's only one point of entry, but we don't need to talk about that here. It's just because it's a PL1 resource, a priority level 1 resource. But so within the restricted area, in designated areas, you can talk secret stuff. If it's just one building and the entire building is a restricted area, in most cases you can talk secret in there without having to worry about too much. You have to enter and exit turnstiles and things like that to get in and out. And then you move into the TS realm. So I try to always, as much as it's a cliche for military people to use acronyms, I absolutely despise the phrase top secret because of the cringe tropes that are associated with it when it comes to like movies and media. People hear top secret, they immediately think aliens at Area 51 and nonsense like that, which, by the way, there are no aliens at Area 51, just to be clear. It's basically an airplane graveyard, and there is some testing that goes on there, but it has nothing to do with extraterrestrial life. It's just weapon system testing. So I try to say TS if I'm going to reference anything at all, and that's what everybody that I work with also just says TS, because there's no need to say top secret. It's just cringy. Everybody knows what you mean when you say TS. So, and that's how the actual document is labeled in most cases is TS. So once you get to the TS level, that is the highest plane of quote unquote classified information. So that is the highest classification designator. But along with TS, often what you'll see is additional designators. And broadly speaking, the reason for the additional designators is we don't want, say there are, just as an example, this is not the real figure at all. Say, for example, there are 100 people walking around in the United States with a TS clearance. There are far more than that, but if we have 100 people walking around with a TS clearance, they all have access to information that is critical to national security. We don't want all 100 people knowing all of that information, because that greatly increases your risk of information leaks, someone committing an act of treason or espionage. So you have the additional designators to say, okay, these 5 people are working just this program, so they don't need to know the other 90% of information. There's absolutely no reason for it. And this is, as I said, your media cliche, movie cliche version of your need to know, these additional designators. We don't ever use the term need to know because we have designators specifically for that. There's no reason to even use that term. That is 100% a Hollywood thing, not something that we say, just like highly classified. It's complete nonsense. But in my career field, I work on a TS SCI program. So SCI is sensitive compartmented information. Everybody says compartmentalized because that's just a more common word, but sensitive compartmented information, and that is pretty self-explanatory. It's described just by what I said before, where I am on a TSSCI program. I'm read into a specific program. You have to go through security steps to be read into a specific program. There are additional steps in your investigation, although it won't be on your side, it'll be on the side of the investigator to give you a TS. So there's a difference between a person that just has a TS and me. I have a TSSCI. It means that I can be read into SCI programs. You can only be read into one SCI program at a time, except in very rare instances with special operations people. This is the only time that I've heard of multiple TSSCI programs being on somebody's docket. I'm read into a specific weapon system, a specific program. I can't go to some random base that has a skiff, walk into their skiff, and look at their TSSCI stuff. That would be the equivalent of somebody who doesn't have a TS at all walking in there and doing that. It's just not... There's no, I have no, if you want to use that terminology, need to know other TSSCI information. And that's sort of how we keep everything partitioned to prevent spillage of critical information. SCI is not the only designator. You have SI, TK. Those are typically intel terms. You also have SAPs, special access programs. Rarely have I had to do anything with special access programs. My weapon system, my program is an enterprise program, meaning that it encompasses a lot of areas of. It's not very specific, if that makes sense. So a special access program is going to be something very specific. My program touches a lot of different areas, so to call it a special access program would be really limiting in a way that we can't function if it's that limited. So I don't interact with special access programs frequently. It's a pretty uncommon occurrence for me. But the reason for the designator, typically with SCI, on top of we don't want people to know this information that don't have a need to know, what you're dealing with very often is very specific and critical weapon system specs. I want to remain very vague here. So things like ranging and overall specific capabilities that a weapon system has that we don't want our enemies. When I say enemies, I really mean China. China dwarfs Russia in every way. It's not close. So everything you're hearing about Russia could be true, but China is by far the bigger threat. So basically it's very weapon system specific critical capabilities that we don't want China to know about. And more often than that, you're dealing with intel information. So you've probably heard of the intel terms like HUMINT, comment, SIGINT, those terms. When we collect intelligence on our enemies, obviously the name of the game is to not let them know that we have that information. So most often when you're dealing with information about enemy troop movements, things like that, that we don't want anyone to know that we know, but more importantly, you're talking about knowing things about enemy capabilities. That's going to be at the TSSCI level. So for me, a lot of what I deal with is that is TSSCI, is some of my weapon system specs are TSSCI. But more critically for me, because I know my weapon system inside and out, I don't need to review information. What is particularly important for me, that's TSSCI, is specific enemy capabilities that have been or are being developed that can target my weapon system. And that information that we have on enemy capabilities are going to be at the TSSCI level. And that's the key point here. So to sort of bring everything on back to the garage documents thing, you're not going to take the risk on American soil of being thrown in prison and given a death penalty for treason to get a list of people's social security numbers who work at a building in DC. That's not what's there. What my assumption would be, and these are, apparently the documents absolutely were there. Nothing was released and nothing will be released, and You'll never hear about it, and I'll never hear about it, what specifically was on those documents. So this is speculation on my part. These are allegations, so let's just say hypothetically, if a person whose name started with B and ended with Iden had documents like that in his garage, and he was, again speculation, was keeping those documents in there to leak information, it would not be confidential or CUI information. It would not be secret information, because getting that information directly from a person in a very high office is too much of a risk at that level. Well, it's my assumption that what was included in those documents is intel-specific information on China. So things that we know about China and their capabilities that we don't want them to know that we know. That's what my assumption would be. That's what makes this whole thing a really, really big deal. This is, I can't stress how critical all of that is to national security more like broadly. It's especially if his crackhead son was involved and we know who he's involved with. Having that information just out in the open, available for people to pay somebody who lives there to come and look at it, is a huge problem, and it is absolutely treason. Again, speculation, allegations. We don't know what was on the document, so I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm not trying to get myself in trouble here. If that hypothetical scenario were to be in fact true, that's what it would be, is people knowing that information is being held at this location that is critical to national infrastructure, and people pay to come and look at it. That's basically what my assumption would be about what's going on. So this is a far more critical thing than it's being given credit for. Of course, if you walked into my garage right now and you were to find a box of TS-SCI documents in my garage, I would be in prison this afternoon. My entire family would be under investigation. Obviously, I would lose my clearance, especially my wife's side of the family, because they were refugees from the Soviet Union. My life would be over, and I would most likely literally be on the chopping block. There's a death penalty associated with treason and espionage. That would be a very likely result for me if I were to be caught doing the same thing that Biden has now been caught doing and Clinton was caught doing. One additional point that I wanted to get into before I talked about Trump is when you go in and out of a skiff, you can't bring any devices, no Bluetooth headphones, no USB sticks, no DVDs. If people have DVDs still, I don't know if people do, but my point is, it is not an accident if you accidentally walk out of a skiff with TS-SCI documentation. I would never even, to go from one room to the room next door, I would never ever put a TS document in my book bag and forget about it. Because a TS document would never be in my book bag. Because I am terrified, just like everybody else is who has the clearance that I do, of making that type of mistake. Therefore, we take this shit really seriously, not even to mention the national security implications of making a mistake like that. When you walk out of a skiff, everything is searched. Everything is looked at. Any documentation that you have is looked at. If I walk out of a skiff and they open up my book bag and look inside and there's a USB stick in there, security forces are going to be everywhere. I'm going to be detained. I'm going to be locked up. They're going to scan it and go through everything and wipe it clean. And I'm going to be questioned. And there will be a security incident and I'll be investigated again. It'll be a whole shebang. So the idea that, oh, it was just an accident, or I forgot I had it in my briefcase, that is complete bullshit. You absolutely cannot accidentally walk out of a skiff with TS documentation or material of any kind. You can't do it. That's it. So if there is, If I go to your house and you have TS material in your house, I know for certain that you did it on purpose. There's no way you did it on accident. That's just not the way that things go. So, moving on to the Trump situation. Of course, everybody else is, all of the Democrat Party state media is trying to reframe this as, well, look at what Trump did. Look at what Trump did. And it's like, okay, then look at what Hillary did. And that sort of argument is just a nowhere argument, playing the whataboutism game is nonsense. All three instances are serious. Now, I know that there's the conservative talking point that we keep hearing that, well, the president can declassify information. The president can declassify information. So you can't just say I have the power to declassify something, to downgrade something. I can't just walk out of my building with TS/SCI documentation, and then when I get to my car, security forces runs up to me and they say, "Hey, what the hell are you doing with that?" And I say, "Oh, okay, well, it's unclassified now. I'm waving my wand." That's not the way that that works. There is a whole ComSec, InfoSec process associated with declassifying something, downgrading something. Obviously, I'm sure that the process is a bit more truncated if you're a president, because you can bully people around. But the excuse for Trump that the president can declassify something is complete nonsense if he didn't already declassify what was found at his house prior to him removing it from the restricted area. So basically what I'm saying is Clinton did this thing that I would be probably given a death penalty for. It seems like Trump also did that thing. So don't run cover for Trump. Don't pursue the whataboutism game with these people. We're not talking about Trump right now. Trump is no longer the president. Biden is the president. If charges need to come down on Trump, so be it. I'm fine with that. He broke the rules. If I broke these rules, absolutely prosecute me, because I don't want other people being able to break these rules and argue their way out of it. Because I actually take this shit seriously. I take my oath seriously, and so do I would hope almost all of the people who have the clearance that I have. And this goes into a whole nother rant about my problem with giving clearances to people who didn't serve in the military. I think that that's a problem because they don't swear the same oath that we do, and public officials don't take that seriously the way that we do. But they don't look at themselves as servants the way that we do. But all three of them are guilty of doing this unless they find that Trump had indeed declassified this material prior to removing it from a restricted area. But the important point at this point is the fact that Biden is the sitting president, and he did this when he did not have the power to declassify anything. So you can remove the possibility that was it or was it not declassified prior to him removing it from a SCIF in Biden's case. That may be true in Trump's case, and hopefully that will be revealed at some point in an unbiased manner. I don't have too much hope, but in Biden's case, it is objectively true that if he had documentation at his house at the secret level or higher, it was illegal for him to have done that. And if I did the same thing, I would be in prison at this very moment. If I got caught right now with even just secret information at my house, 10 minutes later, I would be in chains. It would be a whole thing. My life would be completely over. So, in conclusion, be careful who you get information from. By definition, all of these people especially the Democrat state media, but even the Daily Wire and Tim Pool and other reliable sources for news, they don't have any fucking idea what they're talking about. Anytime you hear somebody say highly classified, or they talk about classified documents, and they didn't have a clearance, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, by definition. Usually I would say, the lived experience argument that leftists use, like women use for the pro-abortion people. You're not a woman, so you can't have an opinion on this. That's complete bullshit in most cases. In this case, it's objectively true, because by definition, you don't know what you're talking about. We don't want you to know what you're talking about. So I would just be careful about the information that you're consuming and the talking points that you're hearing, because the Trump can declassify information as the president is complete bullshit if he didn't do it before he removed the documentation from the SCIF or from the restricted area if it was secret information. So if that's the case, he did something illegal. I know a lot of you guys just love him, but got to face up to it. He did it too, if that's the case. Clinton absolutely did it, and if I did what she did, I'd be in prison, most likely facing the death penalty. Same with Biden. So the important thing today is that this is a huge deal. It is not a small thing. It's not an accident. It's not a, oh, poor old man, he forgot he had TS-SCI documentation in his briefcase when he left the SCIF. That's not the way it works. The focus is on Biden. Don't let people reframe the argument to Trump. Don't let your friends reframe the argument to Hillary Clinton. Right now, Biden is the sitting president. He objectively did something illegal, and the motivations, at least hypothetically, were far more nefarious than they appear. And that's just my perspective coming from a person who knows. Everything, all the information I gave you is available on Wikipedia. If you want to look up classification, I, of course, did not violate any security, my security policies. I would never do that. I have never done that, never been close. Everything that I'm saying is available publicly. It's just you have to be willing to go and seek out the information. So if you have any questions about this or I need to clarify anything, let me know and I will do so. Thank you.